Hello, everyone. Welcome to WIN Forum. It's a Wednesday today. It's our third day of WIN Forum 2020. My name is Catherine Barba. We are together to focus on diversity, inclusion, and transformation. Today we have three live talks to discuss all this. We have decided, because of all what's happening in the US, I don't know where you're living, but if you live in the US, you know that something very, very important is happening. So we thought we would use this platform to address not only the COVID-19 topic and their impact on every one of us as individuals or companies, but also on all these events happening in the US. And for that, I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce you to three incredible people I admire very much. I will start with, who will I start with? Virginie Fauvel. Hi, Virginie.
Hi, Catherine.
Thank you so much for being with us today and for supporting with Euler Hermes, the WIN Forum. I know you for a long time. You are now the Euler Hermes Group CTO. You are in charge of the Americas region and you are a member of the board of management. I know you well because you are a real change maker. You're transforming companies to digital and I thank you for that. We're also here with a young woman, a brilliant young activist. Her name is Fatima Zaman. Hi, Fatima, how are you?
Hello, Catherine. I'm well, thank you.
You're joining us from the UK, right?
Yes, I
am. You are one of the first ever Obama scholars, and you're a member of Kofi Annan's Extremely Together organization. We're really happy to have you with us today, and along with the one and only David Jones. Hi, David. You are. Everyone knows you, but I will introduce you very quickly. You're an entrepreneur, you're an investor, you are the former CEO of Havas. You have started You and Mr. Jones. It's a brand tech company with many unicorns, in brand tech. And above all, you are one of the founders of One Young World, which is a great organization gathering many, many young activists to fight against racism and to promote diversity. Is it right?
Yes, absolutely. We do many things at One Young World, but that's a very important part of our young leaders' work.
Good. So we're here together really to speak. The idea of these 30 minutes together is to realize, to speak about how the crisis, and I mean the COVID plus the recent crisis, are impacting us as companies, as business leaders, or as individuals. And so now, David, the floor is all yours, and I will be back in 30 minutes to thank you.
Terrific.
Have a great conversation.
We'll try and make the next 25, 30 minutes, helpful, interesting, I think clearly, and those of you who have tuned in, if you have questions, we're going to, have an open conversation. But if you have questions or want us to cover anything, just please post a message in chat. But Fatima, Virginie, welcome. It's amazing how quickly the world is changing at the moment. We've gone from one crisis to the next. When we originally were talking about this session, COVID was the huge crisis. We've now got the current crisis in America caused by the horrific and racist murder of George Floyd. As we try and cope with these crises, I'd be really interested for both of you to talk to me about what your biggest personal challenge has been through this time. And obviously, Virginie, I think you've been more involved based in France and in the COVID side of things, and Fatima, given a huge amount of your work and activism, much more around the racial injustice. But feel free to fluidly move between topics. But I'd love maybe starting with you, Fatima. What's your biggest personal challenge been through this time?
So David, thank you so much for having me and this important question. I'd like to start off by saying we're not going from crisis to crisis. We are in a crisis within a crisis. We haven't weathered the first one, that I'd like to point out. My biggest challenge, when, you know, having to decide how to scale down a lot of the peace building work that I do in amidst a COVID-19 world, has been around survival. It is, how do you keep the communities that you have promised to help safe while driving social change and justice for them, and ultimately survival again when it's about POC communities who are being targeted by police brutality. How do we make sure that our voices are being heard and not squashed? So for me, it has been both physically and in the all senses of the world, to survive both crises, and not just to survive but to thrive in them despite the challenges that they throw.
Great, thank you. Virginie, from your perspective.
Yeah, so I agree with you, David. I think the world is changing extremely fast, and we are just in front of big changes. So for me, in the COVID-19 crisis, what I did is really, and what I do, to stay very close to the teams, because we are not able to travel. As you know, I'm in charge of Americas region, and I used to travel a lot to see other entity within Yola Hamas. So it's to stay close to every employees. So I do a weekly town hall, sharing with them news and trying to bring hopes also. Every manager has to reach every day each team member to reinforce the connection, because some people are very isolated in this situation. So the lockdown is less and less difficult in Paris now. We can go outside, and it's a very good news. But I think staying very close to the teams. And as I'm in charge also of the Americas with James Daly, it's also, I would like to bring a message of a kind message to the US. You know, my country, which is France, has been hurt by terrorist attack, and we were extremely sad, extremely angry in France, as you can imagine. And the American colleagues, the American friends, they called me, they sent me many very nice messages about the friendship between France and the US. So today it's just my heart I give to the US, because I know that you live a very difficult time.
Thank you. And I think, I think both points, it's a difficult time, and I think it's very true. It's not, we are living through a crisis within a crisis. Crises are obviously times that are challenging for leaders and leadership, and we've seen that. Do you think you need to be bold as a leader, and you need bold leadership to cope and lead through a crisis? And if so, have you been bold? How do you wish you'd been bold? So bold leadership to cope in a crisis.
It's very difficult, I think.
Let's start with you, Virginie.
No, but it's very difficult to answer. I am bold or not. What I can say is I try to take care of people around me, of the Yola Hamas employees, of my team, also of my family. And what I did, and perhaps it's bold, it's a week after the lockdown, I started a discussion on the social media we have internally in Yola Hamas, asking the employees what do they see in terms of change in the world, and how can we adapt the company to the new world. I do not know if the new world will be better or worse than the one we have, but I think it's important that we all try to shape the new world and to make it, if possible, better. I know that it's very difficult to say that, and I have a question reaching me. Do you think we can have hope because people are losing their job in some company? I know this is very difficult. In Yola Hamas, we work hard to manage the crisis, and it's very important for all companies to manage the crisis. But I think it's very important to exist stronger, because the world would be probably different. So how can we adapt ourselves, the company, to the new world? And with this discussion on the social media, I had many employees who wanted to contribute, to express their view about the new world and what could be the new product. For example, how can we secure more the supply chain? Topic around that, because there is a strong focus on your buyer but less on the supplier. So we can provide elements to our policyholder on that. So it's a way to be.
A quick, how many employees do you have at Euler Hermes?
Around 6,000.
Okay.
All across the world. So we are a global company. We are the global leader. So I think also thinking about the after crisis, it's also a way to project ourselves to something more positive, because some of the employees and some of the citizens were very, very scared about the COVID-19. So it's important to manage the crisis, but also it's very important to prepare the after, to exit stronger.
And Fatima, I mean, I've watched you over the years. You're a very bold leader. What's your answer to this question?
Thank you, David. I will say boldness is an absolute, key element to making sure that we weather these crises in the right way, so that our futures and this new world that Virginie speaks about is one that works for everyone. Unfortunately, leaders were not bold, were not quick off the marks when COVID-19 happened. Many of them refused to acknowledge that this was a global pandemic. Many of them refused to, be quick off the mark and protect their communities. And that's the world over. That's the Bolsonaros of the world, and the Trumps and the Ayatollahs, and many in Western countries also. That compounded by the crisis that we're now in following the unjust killing of George Floyd and many other innocent Black lives, is that no one is being bold. People on the ground are having to take it upon themselves to be bold, while leaders shy away and hide behind desks in their ivory towers. And one of the things that has frustrated me is the fact that this vacuum of leadership that's being left and that's been created by these crises is allowing activists like myself to step up. And a week ago, George Floyd was killed. I was frustrated, I was upset, I still am, even talking about it, to see innocent lives being lost at the hands of militarized police. So I decided to be bold. And I think it was at 4 a.m. I messaged you, David, saying, we've written a letter. It's an open letter demanding justice for George Floyd and everyone else who's died at the hands of police brutality. It will be an open letter that can be signed by everyone with clout, with a platform, with a voice, so that we can lend our support and we can be bold for the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm proud to say that that letter was published yesterday, and it will be being delivered to County Attorney Michael Freeman and his staff in due course, to show that when there is a vacuum of leadership within these crises, we will stand up and we will take the mantle to be bold.
That's great, and it leads into my next question. And you may even have answered it, but what steps have you taken, and this also for you, Virginie, to either discuss internally or communicate externally around the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent protests against racial injustice?
So when I've heard about what happened in the US, I immediately called the team there to see how they were. So the CEO of Euler Hermes also called them, and we will send a message to all the employees. So it's internal communication so far. I do not know what do we plan externally. But for the COVID-19 crisis, I disagree with Fatima Zaman. I think many business leaders took really in consideration the fact that it was a sanitary crisis. It will impact drastically employment, and I do not think that all the business leaders underestimate this COVID-19 crisis. I cannot say for the George Floyd one, but the crisis, I manage it since months now. And honestly, we do not underestimate that all our employees for the very first day before government decision worked remotely. So I think we've taken that very seriously.
No, I think Fatima's point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fatima, it wasn't about the business world, it was about the political leaders.
Okay.
And, you know, I think what we have seen around the world, and it's no surprise to me that probably the country, or certainly the countries and country that have coped the best with this have female leaders, because they tend to be smarter and more responsive. But I think we've seen when you have male know-it-all leaders, and we don't need to name countries, they kind of don't do anything, and the impact is much higher. So I don't think Fatima was having a go at the business. Well, I think she was having a go.
No, this is completely about the lack of political leadership that is necessary to resolve these situations. You know, to every crisis, a political solution, as Kofi Annan, my late mentor, used to say, is absolutely paramount. You know, business leaders can come forward and provide that and fill that gap, but ultimately those who are elected into positions of power must step up, or they must step aside.
Mm-hmm.
Agree, and we won't go down this path, but it's why it's so important to vote. Now sort of, you know, moving on, I'm sure there are many learnings. What has your biggest learning been so far through these different crises? And just in general, what advice would you both give to anyone, senior leader, young leader, about coping in a crisis?
I'll kick off.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm Virginie. No, which I'm not doing my job. I'm sorry.
I can start. No problem. No, the biggest learning is to stay strong. Because I do not know if we are at the beginning of the crisis, in the middle of the crisis, but for sure we are not at the end of the crisis. So, you know, as a leader, I have to take a very, very important decision every day, and many every day. I have also to take care of people, to stay close to the team, to reassure also the teams. So I need to stay strong. So if I have one advice, is really to take care of you, to be able to take care of the others. So eat well, sleep well, practice sport. It's perhaps very basic topics, but if the crisis is lasting for 6 months or 1 year, everybody is going to be exhausted. And as a leader, you need to stay strong and you need to stay healthy to take the right decision. So really, it's basic topics, but I think it's important to share. Because if we overreact at the beginning, we will not be there at the end.
That's sound advice. And do you take your own advice, Virginie, or do you just think you should do it?
No, I take my own advice. I think it's important also to evacuate stress, you know, to have a healthy life, to practice sports, and also to give this advice to my teams. I always tell them, take care of you. If you take care of you, you will be able to take care of your employee, to take care of your customers, and to stay strong.
Great advice. Fatima, what would yours be?
Absolutely echo that. Mine will probably slightly contradict yours, so apologies, but this is the way, this is my style. It is to be relentless. I understand we're in it for the long haul, but we cannot, you know, start small and build up momentum. You have to get attention first, because attention is so limited that if we want to wait for the ideal moment, it may pass us by. So the riotings, the lootings and the protests that we're seeing in the US, where my friends are currently partaking in, I'm constantly in conversation with them. The beauty of technology and what COVID is showing us is we can still be connected and coordinate from our bases in Paris, London, in Hong Kong, for instance, and coordinate a global movement. But we must be relentless, we must be consistent, and we must be coordinated. This is a global movement. It is being felt differently in different parts, but ultimately I'm not going to wait for the right and opportune moment, because it will not be given to us. Debate will be shut down, conversation will be shut down, militarization will occur, and ultimately our voices will be silenced. So for me, it is hound everyone you know, have these conversations in open spaces, in closed spaces, at the family dinner table, and everywhere in between, because that is how we move the compass point to face in the direction of justice, and that's what we need.
So be strong, be relentless, and take care of yourself. I think those are three very sound pieces of advice. Now, both of you are brilliant leaders, and I'm interested in your views on looking at other organizations, other leaders, other companies. Who have you admired for their behavior during the crises, and who have you admired for how they've coped in the crises?
I'm happy to kick off. Without sounding like a broken record, I can tell you who I am absolutely not admiring, and that is the leaders who are failing to do their part, the leaders who are failing to come out and say what is happening, the unjust killings are wrong, the disproportionate impact on BME lives because of COVID-19 is wrong. I admire Jacinda Ardern. You mentioned female leaders are setting an example. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, in her ability to weather the coronavirus COVID-19 crisis for her nation, that is admirable. And more recently, on the Black Lives Matter protests and demanding justice for George Floyd, I absolutely have to echo the words of President Obama, who wrote on Medium just yesterday or 2 days ago, saying actually, if you occupy a seat at a table and you don't then use your voice, get up and leave that table. So those are who I admire, and there are plenty of people who I'm not admiring, and they need to step up.
I'm not sure if you saw, but Justin Trudeau was asked to comment on Trump yesterday, and there's just this 60-second silence as you see his brain clicking about how do I answer this question? Thank you, Fatima. Virginie.
Yeah, so I don't admire specific people, but all the people we were in the front line for the COVID-19 crisis, people who are most of the time invisible. We are talking about nurse, about doctor, pharmacist, garbage collectors, cashier in food shops, truck drivers, and all those people, they make the lockdown possible. And for me, this is the people I admire the most. If everything went quite well, we can see it was not perfect. It's thanks to them. So I would like just to thank them warmly because they were in the front line, and most of the time they are just invisible. So let's make them more visible.
Yeah, I think it was a great reminder to us all that leadership isn't about big titles and big companies and big leaders. There's some amazing leadership we've seen. Now, there's one question, or there's several questions come in, but one I'd like to ask you, Virginie, and then we probably have time for one more. But so this is directed to you, Virginie. It's like, how do you at the same time, respond and take care of the crisis, but also prepare for the future? Are you changing your business mission? Is your business mission evolving? What's your focus? How do you cope with the crisis and prepare for the future?
I think it's a very good question, because all the team are focusing on managing the crisis, and they work all very hard and in a very efficient manner, even if it's remotely, for 100% of the employees. So we have now a team dedicated to think about the after. So we've taken some leaders, some employees to think about the adjustment of the business model, the new offer we will launch, the new workplace we will offer to employees, because for sure we will not travel as we used to, and I think it's a good decision. We will work more and more remotely. So how can we lead also people remotely? So we will have to train our manager to hire people remotely, to encourage remotely, to give hope also remotely, and sometimes to say tough topics remotely. So I think it's a new way. And it's very important to manage the crisis, because we need the company to be here after the crisis. But it's very important that we dedicated time in the board of management and with a dedicated team to think about the after for employees, for customers, for brokers, and for all of us.
Terrific. Yeah, I think it's more proof of how tough it is coping with crises. So I'm now going to move on to the last question. you know, it has been a very tough time for the world recently. Why do you think we can still be optimistic? Can we still be optimistic? And if we can, why do you think so? And I'll start with you, Virginie, and then I'd like to give you the last word, Fatima.
So I am French. So for me, a crisis, a revolution brings a lot of violence, a lot of tears, a lot of sadness. Of course, the French Revolution was a very tough one. But at the end of the day, France is a better world than before. So for me, a crisis, revolution could be tough at the moment, but they could bring a better world. And I do not know if the world of the after will be better or worse than the world we have, but I think it's our duty to shape this new world, to take action and not to be passive and watch what is happening. If we want to change the world, it is now. So for me, really, the hope is to think what we could bring and to take part of this new world. I think ESG, CSR, many topics, balance, more balanced life, probably more equality, more fraternity. I am French, so it's a value which are very important. But if we want that, we cannot be passive.
Terrific.
So there is hope where there is action.
I could not agree more. And Fatima, your view?
David, we absolutely, I agree with everything that Virginie said, and I will add very briefly, we absolutely must hold on to hope, because to lose hope is to admit defeat. And I don't know if you can see, but my t-shirt actually says Common Hope. I'm wearing it to remind myself to stay hopeful that despite these current challenging times, change is possible. You know, the Kofi Annans, the Mandelas of the world achieved change. We stand on a history that allows us to achieve change. And ultimately, if we fight now, the future we will get in the future will be so much better and be so much more hopeful. And so what I will say to everyone listening is, please fight now. Do everything that you can to do to make this world a better place, because I might not be able to pay you back for it, but I will certainly pay it forward.
And I've seen that Catherine has joined us, which is probably
I was listening to you. I was behind my screen, but I was listening to you guys.
I think, you know, Fatima, I know you were one of the Obama scholars, and I read what I thought was a very powerful post from him, talking about that it was about, you know, your generation and the future generations to find these solutions. And I think, you know, I'm an optimist, even if it's hard to be an optimist in the times we're living through. But one of the things I passionately believe is, whilst we can't change the past, we can change the future. You know, we can't change the decades of systemic racism in America, but we can fix the world for the future. We can't change the fact that countries reacted too late to COVID and that they didn't actually have the basic facilities in place in the first place because they'd cut health budgets, but we can change the future. So thank you very much, my brilliant panelists, and over to you, Catherine.
Yes, I wanted to thank you too. Thank you, Virginie. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, David. And you filled me with hope, you know, and I see that the only answer is action. We have to take actions, not to wait for change to happen, but really to cause it. And I just was wondering, Virginie, would you, in the team that is reinventing your future, the future of your company, do you cooperate with young leaders such as Fatima just to change mindset? I believe this kind of diversity is really important too.
Absolutely. We have people from everywhere. It's a very diverse team. I think the world will be better if everybody is committed to the change. And
that's what we are here for.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, really. And
right.
We do not need violence for that.
No. So I hope we will continue this conversation later all together. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you. And we are back for another panel in about 20 minutes to speak about transformation of retail, banking and beauty. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Stay safe,
Fatima, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Stay safe.
Thank you.